today we are joined again by Una Jane Winfield. I'm really pleased to have you back on, Una, because the last interview that we did got quite a lot of views. In fact, it was my best performing video. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. I enjoyed it. I thought I covered a lot of ground. And that was the reason I wanted to come back, because there are developments and there's also a renewed plea that I'd like to put in on behalf of
Yeah,
trans widows.
excellent. Yeah, so yeah, we got, did you say you counted, was it 600 comments that we got on the last video? And the last time I looked, it was at about 29,000 views. That's not, but
Anyway,
it's heading up for 30,000 views, so it's doing really well, and people are still watching it. So it's people are obviously very interested. The thing that I found difficult though was there was quite a lot of criticism in the comments of you, and I think that's because you're quite assertive and you're not someone who's going to be browbeaten.
this is a perennial problem. It's what makes it so frustrating for trans widows to accept that their voice doesn't count for very much. And of course, that is understandable given that we are few in number. But many of the trans widows I have spoken to are highly intelligent, highly qualified, really the last type of woman that you would expect to draw back from a fight, and particularly when it's one that involves the most preposterous assertions and an impudence in men, that the men that they married, that is quite outrageous and beyond any logical comprehension. It obviously has a great deal to do with the weakness of the men that are concerned, and then in wider society, a failure to persuade general men as a whole, the 49% of the population who are law-abiding, decent, chivalrous, motivated to be kind to women, but it becomes very difficult to persuade them that there's something wrong if we are not able to be listened to as logical human beings. I
Yeah,
have a background in science, and I'm not going to give up on this question.
absolutely. I think it's really like it's really difficult for these men when women speak out. When trans widows speak out, their voices are really powerful, and that's why you get shut down. That's why they spend so much time and energy shutting you down.
Still, there has been considerable progress in 2025, starting, of course, with the Supreme Court ruling in April. And some bold graphic designers have produced a lovely poster showing the suffragette flag and a witch in a silhouette in black. Written across this is 2025, the year of the TERF. Yes, let's hope that this will be a turning point. However, I have grave reservations about the possibilities of success with the Sandy Peggy case, because the NHS has a peculiar way of treating its employees, which is so destructive, so utterly like threatening nuclear warfare against their employees. And I'm not exaggerating. One particular case, Dr. Chris Day has been fighting for 10 years against the NHS. He had the support of 2 MPs in the House of Commons. His whistleblowing protected, so-called protected disclosures were well-founded and accepted by everyone. And still, he has not won his case. He's basically run out of legal road. And this is the danger with all of these legal manoeuvres.
What was his legal battle about? I hadn't heard about him.
Right. He was a junior doctor, still is a junior doctor, because his training number has been removed from Health Education England. So a very assiduous, very conscientious, I'm sure extremely good doctor, found himself on night shifts at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Woolwich in East London, and the trust is Lewisham and South London, and he made what he thought would be protected disclosures that there were not enough staff on duty in the high dependency ward at night, and this was rejected. He ended up being they couldn't actually sack him as such from the trust because they needed his services, funnily enough. But they had this really unpleasant way of getting back at him, which was to effectively cut off his path to becoming a consultant in emergency medicine.
Oh, it's outrageous. There's
It
so
is,
many cases of whistleblowers who,
well, it's very particular in the NHS. So I say this because it's important for funders to realise that this is probably going to be a long haul and could well go up to the Supreme Court again. Anyway, I
yeah.
wanted to get on to a separate issue. I learned actually from an article in the Daily Telegraph about a couple of weeks ago. The Bayswater Support Group, which is one of the two major support groups for parents of children who've gone down the trans rabbit hole. The other one is Our Duty. Anyway, Bayswater got in touch with a solicitor, Paul Conrath, to bring a complaint to the regulator of all broadcasts channels, which of course includes the BBC. They allege, of course, with lots and lots of evidence, that every one of the complaints that they've made about the treatment of this phenomenon of trans kids has been always supportive of the notion that there is a separation between the sex of the mind of the child and the body of the child, basically gender identity ideology, and that contrary to their remit as a public service broadcaster, the BBC has just been completely ignoring the absolutely reasonable anguish, distress, complaints that the BBC is not putting forward the scientific, the socially responsible position of the parents who are ultimately the best defenders and protectors of their children. When they complain to the BBC that the interest of the child is not necessarily always in the direction of reinforcing the child's desires at the age of 11, 12, 13, 14, up to 25. It's okay, not legally a child, but still immature. The BBC has completely ignored this consistently. So I thought to myself immediately, well, there's another victim group here, and that is the group of trans widows. So I got in touch with the same group. There were about 7 or 8 of us who wrote, I approached back in 2018, when there was a consultation by the government on a proposal to introduce gender self-ID. This was absolutely the most stupid proposal ever, and there were lots of stupid proposals that the government put forward.
There is.
But I managed to elicit 3 or 4 submissions from trans widows, and so I got in touch with them again. And I now have 2 trans widows, but I would like many more to come forward and say, yes, there is a need for the voice of trans widows to be represented on the BBC and other broadcast channels. This is, we are the witnesses to the mental breakdown. I refuse to use the word transition. It does not describe what I observed. It's a shorthand put forward by activists, as of course we know. So
Yeah.
I have approached the same solicitor who's acting for Bayswater, and it's now actually sub judice, but there is still a need, an immediate need for more trans widows, please, to approach me either via the the comments below this podcast, or via my website, which is transwidows.com, which does receive email through that website. So that's one of the very important things that I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's going to be important. The long-term goal, we are slowly inching towards it. And first of all, this is happening in the US. The state of Florida has brought, the Attorney General for Florida has brought a case against the major providers of medical procedures for gender confused kids in that state. And so basically the first salvos it's going to be a very expensive medical settlement for the medical insurers in the US. And by extension, if the NHS would just open its eyes, there will be a similar set of settlements for when gender confused kids, now young adults, begin to realize how appallingly badly they were advised. And perhaps I should warn the medics and the in particular psychiatrists involved in the so-called treatment of my now dead husband, that he provided no benefit whatsoever to him. He gave my then husband, a whole set of new illnesses that he had not had before. These are physical illnesses. He endorsed inflicting a permanent wound on him by castration, opening a cavity which was not a natural one, that was trying to heal again and again. Sorry, I won't go into too many details this time, because I did get some complaints from actually from my relatives that I was just being a little bit too graphic. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. But
I
this
know
is
the
this
thing is
subject.
people need to know what
This
they're
is the
doing.
problem. This is definitely the problem. And it doesn't matter whether you look at the phenomenon of gender discomfort, confusion, distress that ends in absolute insanity, I would contend. It is distressing on two levels. If you take it to its physical conclusion, you impose wounds on a healthy body, and the mental distress is like the most extreme forms of insanity, particularly the narcissism and the impudence. I think, in fact, those are two ways of describing the same phenomenon. It is not easy to push back against intelligent but completely deluded men in particular. So I'm sorry for broaching this subject. I realize it is uncomfortable, but there's no way that something as important as this can be discussed unless you get quite close to some aspects which are very, very distressing. And then the failure of society as a whole to realize just how ridiculous this has such terrifying consequences for women. For example,
There's
Sandy
so
Peggy.
many people though who say, "Oh well, there's loads of people who are so pleased with the results of their surgery." What would you say about to someone who said that?
I would be interested to know who these very satisfied trans men or trans women are. What I have seen is a handful, literally half a dozen, activists who have had surgeries and are taking cross-sex hormones. And the fact that they cannot use their choice of the path in life for anything other than activism tells me a great deal about how they have really dug a hole and jumped into it.
Yeah, they can't
Do
get
not
out, can they?
they do not discuss their mental state in terms that are recognizable by the vast 99% majority of the population.
It is quite awful when you realise what the surgeons are actually doing to people, like men and women, male and man. It's usually older men and younger women, young women. And I've seen pictures and it's horrendous. And that on a man, they make a wound and then the man has to dilate it every day, otherwise it closes up. So they have to physically keep it open, which is awful.
I'm afraid I feel sick when I think about this, and I have had to learn a great deal about it. You learn, you get to a peak of tolerance of this phenomenon, and then you pull away from it
Yeah,
for my mental good health.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
not something I want to live with. I have had to watch my now dead ex-husband get more and more and more distant. He did recognize me, but that's about all. It was a complete shutting off. And this mental illness is both completely unfamiliar, but according to a clinical psychologist with 30 years experience who calls herself Psych Girl on Twitter, this is actually an extreme form of anxiety. The entire phenomenon can be understood and treated through the lens of an extreme form of anxiety, a compulsion. But I think she's on the right track, and she offers hope to the more curious transsexuals who there are some who realize that they have done something that has alienated all their previous friends and their relatives and their life, and still they would like to come back and enjoy those things that they had before. That seems to me quite a normal wish, and I'm delighted that there are a few of them. Of course, like Kira Bell, like a number in the US, like Sinead Watson. This
Richie
is
Herron.
Richie Herron, of course, such an intelligent and interesting young man. This is a phenomenon we must pull back from.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the interview of that Helen Joyce did with the other Helen, the really
Helen Weberly.
obsessed Helen Weberly.
Yeah.
Um,
So
it was
Helen Weberly actually reported me to my professional body. Her and along with 3 other activists got me suspended, but I pushed back with the help of the Free Speech Union, and the suspension was lifted, and now I'm going after them. I'm going to complain.
You've just given me a very good idea, because I'm going to get on to another thing. I'm glad we discussed this. I can't add that much to what Helen Joyce herself has, of course, said that's
Yeah,
so
it's really good.
intelligent
Yeah,
about her spat. And it was an extended spat where Helen Weberly didn't actually care whether what she said was coherent, founded on any kind of theory or truth. She just wanted to fill this time that was allotted for this podcast with Joe Coburn, a
yeah,
professional interviewer, to make any kind of assertion that would get her more clicks. And in particular, she's trying to open a new market in the US. Good luck with that, because it's a pretty already busy and saturated market over there. And we're hopeful that it's turning we're hopeful that the tide is turning against that. So
So you wanted to reach trans widows. Just to touch on this again, because just to make it clear what you're looking for, you want trans widows for a complaint to Ofcom?
Correct, yes.
All right, about the BBC. Yeah.
About the BBC. And this involves collecting their stories of what they have made complaints about in the past. I realized by searching for the complaint number, which is capital C, capital A, capital S, and then a hyphen, that I had made about 150 complaints over the last 10 years. That's quite a high rate of complaining.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
about 2 or 3 times a year, I would take my complaints up to the editorial complaints unit level, which takes about 6 months to 8 months to get a resolution from. Now, what has been astounding to me is that nobody has thought, hold on, if she's that persistent over that period of time, perhaps we should come and talk to her, particularly from Women's Hour, for example. Anyway, I'm hopeful that there is going to be more activity, but if necessary, I will do this on my own. I want to add another thing. Because of the long delay between the Supreme Court judgment in April and the launching of the ECHR's
Guidance.
so-called guidance, which has still not been officially published. So bodies have ignored the legal requirement to bring all of their procedures, their documents, their contracts, their teaching, their buildings into conformity with the ruling that sex is based on biological sex, not certificated sex. So I wrote to the governing body of my sport that interests me, which is in fact dinghy sailing, but it is called the Royal Yachting Association. It covers everything from yacht sailing and powerboating all the way down to the latest inventions, which are with kite surfing, which are much, much cheaper. It only costs about £2,000 to get aboard, a couple of wings or kites, the harness, and then you're free. And it is absolutely amazing. Now, unfortunately, I have had my emails and a question to the chief executive and the chair of the RYA at their annual general meeting. I've had my questions basically brushed off. No reply. We are considering the point that you raise. Well, I'm afraid that's no reply whatsoever. And I will be considering further action.
So
There is,
what will that action be about?
well, legally, they need to set out to their members some kind of statement showing that they have grasped that there are numerous aspects of the teaching, the safeguarding, the all of the documents of and the RYA is a very, very wide-ranging governing body. So if they keep using the word gender instead of when they mean sex, they are breaking the law.
Yeah.
And they're also being completely unclear about who they have in mind in their documents.
So is there like an experience that you've had, like not just with the documents, but like has situations arised where that's been a problem?
Right. In my local sailing club, there was during COVID, so in 2020 and beginning 21, a man who I knew from he is quite a good sailor. And I saw him, I was absolutely astonished. I saw him in a short miniskirt, a denim miniskirt, kneeling on the foredeck of a laser that was his boat and lifting this mast to put it into the step. It's a hole in the foredeck where the mast is anchored, as it were. this is the kind of thing that absolutely no woman sailor would ever do. Women sailors are always dressed in trousers because it's the most practical thing.
I was going to say, denim skirt is not practical for anything physical, really.
Anyway, there was no danger from him at that point because, in fact, the changing rooms were locked. We were all required to come to the sailing club already wearing a wetsuit, and then we could get undressed either in the changing rooms sequentially or in vans. I mean, some people have a camper van, and then that's easy. So I'm glad to say that this rather drippy man, he just looked sad the whole time, has been seen wearing trousers and not pursuing this. So maybe this was a temporary uncertainty. He certainly didn't try to come into the ladies' changing rooms.
Good. But it's
I'm
possible
pleased.
that someone else might do that.
This is the danger. But I think that if we just keep pushing back, and if America continues to show us the way, then there's a good chance that we can bring the men, the gentlemen, back on side. And the ultimate goal must be to repeal the GRA. I have had this discussion more frequently in the last 6 months than I've had in the last 6 years. It is so important because fundamentally the two different descriptions of the world, one based on all science, all religion, all social interactions and social history since the dawn of time in all societies and cultures of the world, versus the gender ideology invented sometime in the 1950s, initially in France, I think, with two philosophers called Derrida and Michel Foucault, and then spread across the Atlantic to the University of Berkeley and Professor Judith Butler and her utterly incomprehensible ideology.
I don't understand anything she says.
It's anchored in nothing. It is absolutely, it is in fact explicitly anchored in nothing, because if you destroy the common meaning of a word, a meaning shared between all of society, then why are people talking to each other at all? And how are they going to make any kind of mutual understanding? I'm quite surprised that Professor Butler is still in her post, that anyone takes her courses, and I would encourage the board of the University of Berkeley to take a long look at her history of her courses, decide whether they're really worthwhile offering. I would say that in common with the wider concerns about critical identity theory, that's critical race, critical gender, critical whatever else there is absolutely no way forward using this purported theory of relations between individuals and the state. There's nowhere down this path that leads to any growth. Far from it. We end up fighting each other. We end up with misunderstanding. We lose the wonderful inheritance and understanding of science, but also history, which we must convey to the next generation, because this is our life. We have always had a proper understanding that biology and mutually shared definitions and understanding of words is the only way that a society can move forward. And in fact,
Absolutely.
then you get into some difficulties with multiculturalism, where some philosophical and cultural stroke religious conventions are not shared. And there's a lot of work to do to try and bring a new generation onto the same page as most European nations. But
Yeah,
these are much, much bigger questions.
absolutely. I think it's all interlinked though, isn't it? Like the whole, like everything like that and the whole gender thing, it's all interlinked and it's all destroying society. Like the lockdowns and COVID and all of that, it's just one big mess, isn't it?
It is, it is. And um, I have some hopes for the um, for the future if we try to speak to each other face to face. The future must be in person. And I hope that companies become more insistent that their employees should make an appearance once a week, twice a week, because we will not be able to have the communication of body language, the spark of sexual attraction, which is absolutely essential for our future. This is so fundamental.
I know. It horrifies me when I hear about how young people are meeting each other these days, or not, as the case may be. And I keep hearing about people having relationships online, but not in reality. But like, I've been with my husband for over 20 years now, and we met at work.
Congratulations. I'm really pleased to hear that. That's
Yeah,
wonderful. And
but that doesn't happen anymore, does it?
well, I'm glad to say that my daughter's new job involves going into the office 2 or 3 times per week minimum. I'm a bit more worried about my son. He's proposing to take a new job, and he lives in San Francisco, but the job would be based in Washington. So they would only fly him across the continent a few times a year, and that doesn't seem to be enough. However, the field that he's in, I think, is really based in San Francisco. So that's presumably the reason that they offered him the job.
Yeah, it is so important to see each other in real life. There's something about getting together in person, isn't there? There's just that connection that you can't get online.
And it's easier to ignore uncomfortable subjects. That actually brings me on to another subject, which is back on beating the same old drum, but that's what our interview is about. I have sent out my usual Christmas cards to my neighbours, hoping that they would come and have what I would like to be a low-key questions about the posters that I've had on my door for the last, it's now 2024, 5, sorry, 6 years. All my
Yeah,
gender critical posters on my door. But I regret very much to say that hardly anybody has come to ask. The
yeah, that's a
the
shame.
couple, they are literally my neighbours, and a drinks party before Christmas seems to me a very good way of somebody who's maybe a bit bold saying, Una, you're playing with fire here. Why are you putting this up for months, in fact, years on end? Uh, what difference do you think are you making? And then I would gladly talk about this. The
Yeah,
idea originally, of course, was borrowed from Kelly J. Keane. She, in I think it was 2018 or 2019, um, paid for a billboard
it's
high up
2018.
on the side of a building at was it the Labour Party conference or the
Yeah,
Conservative Party
I think
conference?
it was in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference.
And it lasted only about a week, or if even less than that, before trans activists approached the owner of the billboard and said, "Oh, she's breaking the law, she's transphobic," or some other nonsense, with the dictionary definition of woman, noun,
Hmm.
adult, human, female.
Yeah, like,
Absolutely. We must win. Okay, I've done a few other things. My council, I have submitted a question for their quarterly full council meeting, where at the beginning there is an opportunity for 30 minutes worth of questions from the public. I regret to say that I didn't manage to get my question. It's always the same question. It's the question following on from the Supreme Court ruling. I went to the public meeting in July. I had hopes that the question which I put in the day before was going to be heard, because there was another member of the public with me in the public gallery above, and she had managed to get her question in, but I was not called to go
So
down.
what was your question?
My question is, what changes are the council going to make as a result of this ruling? Do you realise that there will need to be changes, not just to the signage and the layout of toilets, if you have made gender neutral toilets, but also to all of your relations with your local authority schools, any sports facilities, swimming pools, gyms, all of the instructions to the contractors running these facilities. You must ensure that all of your equal and equality impact monitoring forms use the term sex, not gender. If you want to ask about gender reassignment, then that is a subsidiary question, but it's not the primary question on an equality monitoring form. Similarly, all application forms for jobs, all surveys with the public, when you have the monitoring questions, they must comply with this requirement. So quite a long question. And my summary was to the leader of the council, what steps are you going to take in the coming year to meet these requirements? And so when I didn't get called down to the lower gallery, where those who succeeded in getting their questions accepted, they had been led down the stairs. Well, I thought, okay, well, I'll just go in the back of the hall downstairs, and I'll sit at a desk and I'll see what happens. And the security people saw me slipping in, and they tried to bully me. They were making miles more noise, of course, than I was. So I thought, this is ridiculous. So the questions were bit by bit by bit asked, and I expected to be the last one. But a very nice gentleman who was asked the question just, not the very last one, but the one before, said, I'm not going to do a follow-up question because there's one more member of the public who wants to ask a question. So he was very chivalrous, and it was he who basically deferred. But unfortunately, the time went click, 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 click. Doing, the red light went on. No more questions from the public. So instead of taking this defeat, I slipped out from behind a desk, went round the ends of all of the desks of the councillors, and put my printed copy of my email to the leader of the council flat on the desk in front of me. At that point, of course, they were chasing after me. They were trying to push me here and push me there. And I said, hold on, I've left my coat. Oh, here's your coat. And they pushed into my arms somebody else's coat and scarf. And I said, no, that's not mine. So please just let me get back to my desk and get my coat. And reluctantly, they did so. It's now October. Sorry, that meeting was in October. I said July. It was actually October. I'd tried in July, and I failed again in October. Now we are December the 12th. I get an email yesterday from the governance director saying, we will not let you into any public meeting And the question that you have submitted, you'll get a written response to. Needless to say, I have not accepted this at all. I am going to take this up with the Director for Legal Services in the Council, who I happen to know from a previous spat about other things. You begin to know who does what.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely essential to put your head above the parapet and be as bullshit as you can.
I was going to say, Una, you sound like a right troublemaker.
Yes.
I love
yes.
it.
And I've also copied in the reporter from the local democracy reporting service, and he was interested. He wanted to see the letter from the governance director. So we'll see what happens next.
It's terrible, though, they're actually shutting down questions from the public. And they're not following their process, then, I would think, when they do that to you.
There is no alternative but to make the most almighty fuss that you can to stay just this side of the law, but to make them aware that this is completely unacceptable. And of course, that's what all of us campaigners are doing as much as we can all the time. And it doesn't make us popular, but we're not seeking popularity. We're seeking justice, and we're seeking the common sense that used to exist before 2004. I feel tired just describing how frustrating and ultimately there's a disquiet that's involved. If they will not come even a tiny bit, just listening, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I have
There's some women in, is it Bristol, who are taking the local authority to court because they weren't allowed to speak in a council meeting.
I'll be following their example. I will open legal cases against anyone who refuses to discuss this. I'm glad to report that the opposition, the leader of the opposition group of councillors in my council, has listened to me, knows, in fact, supports the general proposal that nobody can change sex, and to have a law that says that you can is preposterous. So, I mean, but the problem is that there are so few of them compared to the overwhelming majority of the administration councillors. But having said that, at least two of their councillors have defected to the Greens, in fact. Good luck with that. Another councillor earlier this year, I think in July, was suspended, had the whip suspended. So, you know, their majority is bit by bit being eroded by the protests on this and other issues. It's mainly the total tyrannical control which the leader of the council is exercising over his own councillors. Everyone objects to it, not just the general public.
Yeah.
And we will make a difference. We will get this. I should, of course, mention extremely important immediate problem starting in January of next year, the so-called puberty blockers trial.
That's horrific.
It's horrific. It's child mutilation. Everyone who thinks about this for a second realizes that kids, particularly in the era of social media, have, and also in the era of confused teachers who don't feel strong enough to put their foot down and say, I'm not going to confuse a child with this absolute nonsense.
Well, a lot of them are activists, aren't they?
I wonder how many. I think a lot of them try to salve their conscience by saying, well, we've been instructed to obey gendered intelligence, all sorts, trans, I don't know. There are still far too many of these so-called educational groups seducing and imposing this complete nonsense on the teaching program. There is another a piece of work that needs to be done, there should be complaints to the Charity Commission to try and get these bodies, these little activist groups, if they have charitable status, get them closed down, because they are actively destroying the mental health of
This
youth.
is the thing, though. I don't think the Charity Commission would be effective because the Charity Commission hasn't got any teeth, and these organisations are funded, and it's top down, isn't it? So that's the issue.
But still, Stonewall got a lot of flack, and the funding which they used to receive from businesses and from local government. I'm afraid to say that my council is still giving money to Stonewall, which is perhaps why they're not listening to me. I will never give up. I feel like Churchill, on the
Yeah.
beaches, on the
hmm
streets, whenever.
Interestingly, when I was at the Battle of Ideas, which I know you were at as well, I went into the session about digital ID. And it was in a room where there was a plaque on the wall, and it was talking about Churchill. And I just looked at it and went, he'd be turning in his grave if you could see what was happening.
I am really sorry, in a sense, that the subject that I studied, organic chemistry, is ultimately responsible for the instigation of this corrupt idea. It's only because the two principal sex hormones, estrogen for women, although there's subsidiary, there's progesterone and there are others, and testosterone for men, and there are other subsidiary fewer male sex hormones. Those compounds were isolated as pure white powders, so they could be mixed up with water or saline or sterile saline and then injected into any human, whether it was appropriate for their metabolism or not.
It's quite
And then the harm
horrifying, isn't it?
started. The harm is not just physical. The harm is also psychological. But as Walt Heyer, the now really elderly, desisted transsexual man, told me, it's the belief that you have an identity that is the opposite of your physical sex. That is the harm. That behavior that comes, the taunting, the rejection of all normal relationships, that is the problem. And that is a task that must be tackled by psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And of course, you remove the petrol that's been poured onto this flame. The petrol is all the activists and influencers on social media.
Yeah. I've decided to focus my practice on trans widows and detransitioners and women who've got trans family members.
Well, thank you. This is such an important social phenomenon. I'm very pleased that you've spoken, I think, with Uta
Yeah.
in America. And I think there's another lady that you've spoken to. The more that they come.
We've had two others. So we've had Jenny and we've had Joy as well.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, I hope they hear this one, and I hope that they come forward. I have actually spoken a bit, spoken email. No, it was Twitter with Jenny, and I know her point of view. I know this is an incredibly difficult, particularly family dynamics, so difficult. But
Well,
since
often the trans widows have children who then go on to be trans as well. It's so worrying.
I deliberately made sure that there was
Yeah.
only I moderated the contact between my then young children, 10 and 12, and their departed father. And I'm extremely glad that I did this, because the
Yeah,
last thing, it would have broken my heart to see any further confusion. And of course, like any um, spouse, there is a very strong human desire to pull your children onto your side against your spouse that you're fighting with. But of
yeah,
course, this is so vile, this situation of being abandoned, being left as a really um, unsure and very distressed, enraged, absolutely incandescent with rage at the unreasonable behavior of this man, and fearful, terrified that he could stop paying for two children that he fathered, but that he must never have any unsupervised contact with. This was a difficult, that's a small, very, it was a very, very difficult situation, but I navigated it, and I'm now in a position to call out these absolute imposters. We are
yeah.
going to, we're going to open the eyes, I hope, of the rest of the world, that there are limits to every political movement. When they talk about swinging of the pendulum towards inclusion, yes, it's a very attractive an idea, but there's always, like everything, a limit, and that limit is insanity. And transsexuals who mutilate their body are absolutely mad. But still, and the case of Walt Heyer is an example, if they want to change, they can, but it does require a lot of work. All cures in mental health are very, very hard work, because they have to come from inside the patient. The therapist can only offer hints,
Yeah,
and this is a tentative suggestion to um, a patient who may or may not have the energy and the intelligence. And
the resources. So yeah, so it's about the client doing the work,
and
and yeah,
I mean, my husband definitely had the intelligence if he'd wanted, but he was basically lazy, very, very lazy, which was difficult, difficult to cope.
yeah. I just wanted to ask you about, if there's other trans widows who want to get involved and help with the things that you want to take forward. Do they need to be like open about who they are? Can they do it anonymously?
Yes, just so long as I've got an email address, basically.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
they'll probably be happy to talk to you. Do you know what I mean? I know that a lot of the trans widows don't want to be public about what's happened.
I do understand this. And another problem which I've come across with just one trans widow, so I don't count her among the 7 or 8 that I've had correspondence with, a woman who sent me video footage, and who was so distressed, so um, she was not controlled in her own statements, and she lashed out at her husband, who I'm sure was absolutely exasperating to
Yeah.
despair. But because she couldn't conduct a calm conversation with me, I could not take this forward. I was very, very distressed about this. I actually forwarded her email to one of the campaigning groups. It was either Fair Play for Women or Sex Matters or A Woman's Place UK. And they said, yes, we have had correspondence from this woman. And unfortunately, we agree with your assessment that she needs to sort herself out first.
Yeah.
Wow. We could do with some support. Maybe I could call on not James Barrett, who was the psychiatrist who condemned, I'm going to use that word, he condemned my then husband to the wilderness. But other psychiatrists, for example, Dr. Az Hakim and other psychiatrists who are supportive, there are 2 or 3 who are quite active in the US. If they could come forward and give trans widows a bit of a boost, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much, particularly as they would see the other side. They would understand the terminology which the trans affirming psychiatrists are using in their treatment. So I would encourage rebellion in the ranks of the psychiatry profession, please. I think
Definitely.
it's
Well,
important.
we've got the thoughtful therapists in the counselling world, and I'm part of that. Yeah, and they're really good. So, yeah.
But there are only, to my knowledge, there's only one member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and that's Dr. Az Hakim, who has put his head above the parapet. But then his approach to transsexual men, I think that he only, maybe this is an accident. Anyway, that's not important. He got groups of transitioners who had already gone through their obtaining a gender recognition certificate and therefore had the rubber stamp. And he had mixed therapy groups with those who aspired to that state. And because they could ask each other questions freely, many more of the would-be transitioners decided that, no, on further reflection, this was actually not for them, and pulled back and found some kind of harmony or at least accommodation with their anxieties. And that seems to me absolutely wonderful. And I'm very surprised, but not surprised
Yeah.
that this hasn't.
It's probably the environment that was created in that group where they felt able to say, well, actually, no, this harmed me. Because online, if they were to do that, they'd get piled on, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Every group where you get polarization and one clan clinging to the rainbow or the pink and pale blue flag, and the other group saying, no, we're women, noun, adult, human, female. By definition, you are not coming closer. You're not making space for persuasion. I'm never going to be persuaded that there is any theoretical or practical benefit from espousing gender identity ideology. And I'm hoping to persuade the rest of the world that this is a much, much more sound position. But we need to talk with each other.
Yeah, I think more people are realizing. I mean, I talk about it everywhere I go, and I'm just thinking about so my son's getting married, and I went with his fiance to get our wedding dress, and the woman in the shop, I ended up telling her about what I was involved in, and she didn't know. Like, her daughter was getting sucked into all the ideas as well, and she was just like, "Oh yes, it's just a phase kind of thing." And by the time I'd finished, she was horrified, and she was going, "This is happening in the NHS. They're giving them drugs," and I was like, "Yes." To children, she couldn't believe it. I was
To
like,
people,
yes.
a lot of people, quite understandably, don't want to go near a disgusting, dirty, grey subject like mental illness in detail. And the thought that children are having their understanding shaken, just their sense of who they are, completely shaken. Nobody, no adult could, no parent could accept this. This is terrifying. There was a very interesting discussion. This was another podcast with an outspoken woman who was called herself Nicole. And this was a podcast from, I think, Our Duty. They were English voices, and it wasn't Bayswater Support Group. Nicole stumbled as a completely innocent parent on the beginnings of her daughter's confusion. One day, knowing that her daughter was, I don't know, 13 or 14, so was, really starting getting little breasts, and she looked at the profile of her daughter and thought, body shape's odd. What's happening? And she asked her daughter to say what she was wearing. And so she took off her overclothes and she was wearing a binder underneath. And
Really
then
harmful,
Nicole
isn't
made
it?
further inquiries, looked at her child's um, text, not textbooks, this is all written materials, realized that she was being taught that there were more than two sexes, that she'd also changed on her notebooks her name and her pronouns. And because Nicole was so quick on at identifying these changes, she managed to pull the child away. She made it absolutely crystal clear that she could not wear a binder, and she refused to use any new pronouns, told the school that she, and had a conversation which started off badly but ended with the the teachers understanding the seriousness of social transitioning. And fortunately, the child was quite reasonable and decided herself that she didn't want to go down this path. This is a happy ending. Not
Yeah,
everyone is so quick at realizing what's happening.
yeah,
So these are things which I talk about. I wear my woman, nan, adult, human, female badge whenever I go to any shop. I try to delay a bit at the checkout in order specifically to get particularly women on either side. But I want to persuade men also that this is a matter which isn't going to go away unless, as a population, we decide that we've had enough of this nonsense. It's costing tons of money. We are paying twice over, for example, for the legal challenges, because if you take on the NHS, if you take on a university, if you take on any public sector body, you are spending twice as much. I just feel so poor and so tired as a result of this. But nothing on earth can be done until we conquer this nonsense.
absolutely.
I think I could sort of end because
Yeah.
I
You
feel
said quite a lot.
I'm so passionate about this. I would like other trans widows to get in touch with me, please, under
Yeah,
any framework that they like. I'm on Twitter. I'm at capital S, trans widows in the plural, and a capital T. This is because I would like a few more trans widows to get in touch with me from the scientific community. There must be some. Um, Anyway, please just get in touch and then we can make a point.
yeah. Well, Una Jane, it's been lovely speaking to you again. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you, Kelly. I really enjoyed it. I always do. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to take a moment to speak directly to the women listening who might be struggling in silence. So maybe you're living with the fallout of a husband or partner who's suddenly decided he's a woman, leaving you feeling confused, coerced, or even pressured into things you never consented to. Maybe you're a mother with a daughter or a son who now says they're trans, and you're carrying the heartbreak of that loss without anyone around you really understanding. Or maybe you've been cancelled, silenced, or bullied in your workplace, in your family, or even online, and you're left questioning your reality, your confidence, and your sense of self. If any of that sounds familiar, I just want you to know that you're not alone, and you don't have to keep pushing through it on your own strength, because that's exactly why I offer counselling for women. It's a private, safe, and non-judgmental space where you can say the unsayable. And I know how hard it can be to put words to feelings of betrayal, grief, or anger, especially when the world around you just wants you to be quiet. In our sessions, you'll you'll be heard, believed, and supported without judgment. My work is grounded in person-centred counselling, but I also bring in other tools like inner child work, trauma-informed approaches, and relational models to help you uncover what's really going on beneath the surface. Together we'll explore how the past is shaping the present, untangle the dynamics of coercive or narcissistic relationships, and give you space to grieve losses that others might dismiss or deny. The women that I work with often tell me that our sessions give them clarity, strength, and the ability to start making decisions that honour their own needs, sometimes for the first time in years. And so whether you're trying to rebuild after coercion, come to terms with ambiguous loss, or simply reconnect with who you are, therapy can be the place where you start to feel like yourself again. And I offer a free, no obligation consultation so that you can see if working together feels like the right fit. There's no pressure, just a chance to talk about what you need and how I might be able to help. You can find out more at kellyoliverdougall.co.uk. You deserve a space where you are truly heard, and if this speaks to you, I'd be honoured to walk alongside you on your journey of healing and strength. A massive percentage of people watching this channel are not subscribed. That's 86.5% of watchers are not subscribed to the channel. Please subscribe. It helps us to get more guests and reach more people who need help, and to make sure that women know that they are not alone.